Good morning or afternoon or I don't even know what time of day it is, but who cares? Because you might be watching this at midnight. So
3 minutes till noon.
Oh no, we better.
It's our noonday show.
It's our noonday show. Well, good after almost noon, people.
Yep.
We have discovered that many people have problems with holes in drywall.
Wow. Wonder how that happens.
I don't know. Apparently, there's a lot of people having wild parties and people just falling into.
They punched a pretty nice hole.
Yeah, that came from a nice square fist. Yeah. We decided we were going to cover the topic of how to patch up drywall. It seems like a pretty common thing that most people need. Most homes these days are made out of drywall on the interior. So it's a common problem.
It is. And one of the more common problems we see is when a doorknob hits the wall.
Yeah.
And
so you don't end up with a square, you'll end up with a circle.
We got a really good fix for that. This little item right here, it's got an adhesive back on it. Little circle and adhesive back. You peel the backing off, place that right over the hole where the doorknob made the dent, and it's paintable. You can paint it to any room color and any texture.
Let me see this. So you put this on over a hole already.
Or an indentation. A lot of times it's just an ugly indentation.
Unless you've got really snarly teenagers who...
Yeah. And if it is punched all the way through, then you'll have to come back and patch, like we're going to demonstrate here today.
Would this be a good thing to put on your wall before it gets a hole?
Yeah.
If you know that someone's got some door slamming tendencies?
If you don't have an opportunity to use a door stop, and there's some places that's just not very practical. There are toe snaggers. And there are some that'll mount in the...
Those little boingy things.
Yeah, they'll mount...
I don't know if anybody knows what those are actually called.
Door stops.
Door stops.
Flexible door stops.
Flexible door stops. There's sprungy things, toe snaggers.
And we're getting off course, but they also make one that goes in the hinge. Oh, by the way, do you know why the drywall man, when he showed up for work, dipped his thumb in blue ink?
No, not at all.
His boss told him he needed a blueprint.
Oh. Yeah.
Blueprint.
I got it.
Yeah, blueprint. Okay. All right, we've got
You don't need a blueprint to fix a hole in the wall.
This is a gnarly hole in a nice piece of drywall.
It is a nice piece of drywall.
And the first thing I'm going to suggest you do is just knock off these little paper edges.
Because drywall it's two pieces of paper, one on each side.
Right.
And then this cellular foam rock stuff in the middle. Gypsum.
Actually gypsum, yeah. And it won't burn.
Right.
You know, the paper may burn off, but the gypsum's not going to burn. So it won't support flame. That's why we use it.
Right. So you want to knock the paper off.
I do that just because it's going to be a extra sanding if you leave it on there.
Right. Gives you a smoother finish at the end.
Right. And of course you all realize that we're not going to be able to finish this in one episode.
Or not in one take.
Right. It's going to be a really long video if we do.
We can edit it.
These are just nail holes down here that you're getting ready to paint the room. And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to smooth them up a little bit.
If you've ever lived in an apartment and the landlord wants you to patch all the holes you made before you leave. And,
you know, contrary to what you might hear in the college dorm or something, don't use toothpaste to do that with.
Oh, no. That's a cheap trick that's going to make somebody really mad down the road.
There are some neat products out there, and I'll get these out of the way before we move on to the patch. This is actually just a little tube of joint compound or spackling. It comes with a squeezable soft tube, almost like a sausage tube, and it has its own little applicator.
Oh, that's neat.
That you can smooth it out after you put it on. Great for those little nail holes and just little minor imperfections, and you don't have to get a whole tub of spackling or joint compound.
That's
pretty neat little item.
That'd be a really good going away present.
And this one, good little quick fix. Basically the same thing. It's got spackling inside. It's got the applicator. It's even got a little sanding pad on the bottom. And the neatest thing about this is it's already got primer built in. So you're good to paint after you finish that up.
My goodness, some people are so clever.
Oh, there's always a better mousetrap somewhere.
These are for holes, not mice.
Right.
All right, I'm going to put these back here since we talked about them, and this one too.
Yep, we can do that.
So this is getting awkward with all this stuff right here.
And then there again, if you got a bigger job to do, go ahead and invest in a little plastic drywall mud pan. It's handy to work with, and if you've got bigger jobs to do, it's also got a scraper on the side that'll help you get the excess mud off your knife.
Is that for when you're actually hanging drywall sheets and things
Yeah, it would be
of
good
that
for
nature?
that. Or bigger jobs than what we're doing here today.
Then maybe it's a butt print in your wall and not just a punch.
Yeah.
I've known somebody with a butt in their wall.
This is the little patch kit we're going to use today. It's a mesh screen with nylon reinforced fiber and a little bit of aluminum in there. It's got an adhesive back on it, and I'm going to show you how we're going to patch this hole with that.
Those are really neat because you don't have to worry about where that piece went that fell out of your wall.
Right. And it used to be in the old days we'd stuff newspaper, anything we could find in there to make a backer, but this just works so much better.
Cool. I like that it's sticky.
I'm going to peel that off, and it is adhesive. And we're going to put that over the hole. Press it down, and you can indent it a little bit, just so it'll help with your finishing process.
I'll get this side over here.
And we can take our putty knife and make sure we've got it firmly attached. And for this small job, we're just using, a small putty knife. I'm gonna have to use a smaller one to get it out of the tub and then get it up here on the actual wall. And that should be the consistency you want to work with, just like it comes out of the can.
And this one's just regular vinyl spackling.
And I chose that because that's the one I like to work with. We've got some fast dry. We've even got one out there that goes on pink, and then as it cures, it turns white. So you know that it's sandable once it turns white.
Yeah, this one you're gonna know by touch.
You can tell by the color. I mean, you can.
It turns kind of a darker white.
Yeah, brighter white. Yeah.
A brighter. Well, that's opposite of darker white, Dad.
Yeah.
We'll see what color it turns.
And your first coat, you're just going to lay on what I call a skim coat. You just want to start the patching process. Don't overdo it because you're going to have to sand that off or sponge it off later. And we may talk about sponging.
Oh, sorry, I took it from
And we may not. But sponging is another technique to finish your drywall. It eliminates a lot of dust, but it does require a little bit of technique and a little bit of finesse, or you wind up redoing what you did before, which is not always a bad thing. It's how you learn. It's called experience.
So if you got a hole in a closet, start there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I don't know how you would get a hole in your closet, but maybe you got real rowdy one day and couldn't get your sweater on. That would be the only way I'd get a hole in my closet. Punching, trying to get my sweater on.
All kinds of things happen. You could have a badger get in the house.
I don't know about a badger. We're gonna make a mess.
No.
Okay. Would it be a good idea to put a drop cloth down if you are kind of messy like me? Or maybe a dish towel?
I would never say that's a bad idea. It's water soluble. It'll clean up with water. And I'm to the point where I'm almost overworking this.
It's kind of like icing a cake, but you're icing your wall.
Yeah, you got your mother an icing certificate for a Christmas gift, and
yeah, we went and iced cakes.
she loved it. She really had a good time. So
I'm probably better at icing walls than I am cakes, though.
I'm going to leave it at that right there for this patch. We're going to let that dry, let it cure. We may just scuff it a little bit with sandpaper and then apply another coat. And when we go to the next coat, we're going to get gradually bigger. We're going to get wider with our putty knives. And that way you'll cover more area and hopefully there'll be less sanding to do.
Why don't we fill some of these little baby holes
All
while
right.
we're here? Because those are super easy. And
You want to try one?
well, I've filled my share of holes in the world,
Well, I thought too you had.
but I can do them. The problem is sometimes you use nails that are huge, but you just want to push your putty in I always get too much. But then
Well, keep in mind that it will shrink. So
it will shrink.
Yeah. So,
okay.
When
But don't you want to just scrape it down until it's smooth?
Yep.
And then you got to let it dry and sand it off till it's smooth. Then
Well, let's not leave our job undone. Let's go ahead and fill the rest of those holes.
They look like pimples now.
And what's happening is that little bit of paper that is sticking up there, that's absorbing the moisture out of that mud, and it's going to swell up a little bit. So
Oh, okay.
that's why you're going to have to sand that back down.
Well, I didn't know that, but that makes complete sense. See, that doesn't take any long, and it doesn't smell minty fresh, so you don't have to worry about your landlord getting mad at you for putting toothpaste
That's
in the wall.
right, exactly. And when it is ready to sand, I like to use these little foam block sanders. They're really, really handy. And I always appreciate a good drywall man. Those guys earn what they earn what they get for doing a job. But I had a professional to come in and do some work at my house that was over my head, and I was surprised to see him pull out of his tool bag this kind of sander. The professionals don't have to sand a lot, but I was happy to see that that's what he was using.
Was it a Do It Best?
He's one of my good customers, so I'm sure it
probably
was a Do It Best. It was either Do It Best or 3M. We sell them both.
Cool. So we're going to let this dry and come back and sand it. Well, some time has passed.
It has.
It took a while for this to dry. We've come back a few days later just because, life happens. Do your first coat, walk away.
Right.
Come back when it's convenient to you. Now what do we do?
Now we're going to take our sanding pad. This is one we talked about the last segment.
Yep.
And it's coarse on one side and kind of a medium on the other side. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to knock these ridges down. I'm going to knock the high spots down, and we'll be ready for another coat.
So you're using that coarse side first?
Using the coarse side, yeah. And I'm not worried too much. I'm just trying to feather everything out so it'll blend in with the finished drywall. That's probably about all I'm going to do with that. We've got some low spots in here, and I'm going to put another little skim coat on, and I'm going to use a wider knife so I can cover a bigger area.
And get all that texture from the actual patch covered.
Right, yeah, that'll be hidden.
You sanded off some of my little holes too.
I didn't intend to, because we can come back now and
we could probably
just use
paint
the
over
fine-
those if we...
yeah, we'll use the fine side and just knock those down a little bit.
I might not have used enough putty in some of them.
Well, remember we talked about it shrinking,
Yep, it did.
and it did. You can see that it actually did shrink a little bit.
You got those, you can see the edges of the holes still.
Right.
But that's okay. Let it dry. Those holes dried a lot faster than the big one did. Do you have to worry about cleaning off the dust before you
Not
add?
at this point.
Okay. But before you paint.
Yes, definitely before you paint. I'm just going to go ahead and top off these little nail holes. Okay, that takes care of those little nail holes. That'll probably be enough that the next time we sand those will be ready to paint over.
Nice.
Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit these low spots, a little low spot over here, a little bit more over here so we can feather that back in. But while it's still wet, I'm going to put it on with this knife simply because it's easy to get in and out of this little can.
Yep.
And then I'm going to come back with my wider knife and dress everything up.
So it is kind of like doing a cake, but instead of when you're doing a cake, you have to scrape everything while it's still wet. You don't want to mess with it when it's dry. But with this stuff, you want to wait until it's dry, then knock it all back, then add more.
Yeah, and it's cool back here, so it's kind of retarding the dry time, which is good for us.
How's that good for us?
It gives me more time to work with it.
Oh, I'm thinking as a homeowner, I want it to dry fast.
Well, in the house, with
Oh, that's a really big one.
this is a little, and you can tell this is the one I use in the shop. And the reason those heat stains are on there is we use this when it'd be another good segment, but when we're reglazing an old wood sash window, we use a heat gun to soften the old glazing. That's why the burn marks are on.
We have lots of old windows at my house. We can bring some in. or you can come to my house. Nice.
I'm going to leave it right there. You could see it was starting to dry a little bit, and I was pulling up those little craters. I'm going to leave it alone right there. One more scuff sand and one more little skim coat, and we'll be able to put some primer on there.
Well, fancy. Okay, gotta wait again.
Yeah, this is a process.
Hopefully it won't take as long to dry this time, because that was not nearly as much mud as the first time.
And what you don't use,
spackle.
you can put back in the can.
Is mud interchangeable with spackle? Is that an appropriate term, or is that something completely different?
No, it's pretty much interchangeable.
Okay.
Mud typically is when you're doing new construction. You got the big wide
Yeah.
seams. All the tradesmen call that mud.
That's what I thought. That's
You
a
can call it spackle.
pro tip for you. All right, well, we're going to wait for that to dry and come back and sand and do one more coat. All right, we're back here at our slightly taller this time patch spot. We put our thing up on wheels to get it out of the way because some time has passed. You might notice our costumes have changed. We're not too big into continuity here, so we're going to finish this patch up so that you guys can know what the final steps are. So what do we have left to do on here?
Okay, well, you know this has been a process. What we're going to do is we're just going to finish sanding it. And I've just got a little bit to do. And I really like these sanding sponges because they keep everything nice and flat.
Maybe the wheels weren't such a good idea. Now our structure's moving. Hopefully the walls in your house aren't going to shake. If they shake, you've got bigger problems.
Yeah. And down here is our nail holes, and they're smooth, they're ready to go. As far as I'm concerned, we are at the paint stage. And
there's lots of dust on there. Are you going to paint over all that?
no, we're not going to paint over the dust. We have a damp cloth, and damp, not wet, just damp. We're going to wipe that down.
And hopefully you're not doing this on straight up drywall either. You'll probably have a painted surface that...
I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, okay.
Hand me that can of primer,
Which
the
one?
one furthest away from
Primer.
me. If you are working with new drywall and new drywall mud, if you buy a primer, a wall primer, make sure that it has a vapor barrier. That's very important. Use on new or previously painted drywall or masonry, but new is the key. This primer has a vapor barrier in it. What that does, that seals any remaining moisture that was in that drywall mud. It seals it in, so it won't show through on your finished coat.
Cool.
We're not going to use that
We're not
one
using this today, though.
because what I'm trying to simulate is a patch in a wall that has been previously painted, even though this one hasn't.
So I'm opening this, so don't spill it.
Well, set it down because I have
Because you don't
something-
trust me.
I do trust you.
I don't trust myself. I might spill it.
Folks, I get this question all the time. People will say, well, why should I buy primer? Why don't I just use 2 coats of the finish paint on this? You can. It's not going to give you the best job. And here's why. You know, paints are rich in pigment. And what that does, that helps it to cover. It provides durability. It retains the color. And it controls the sheen. And that's very, very important because if you put paint only over that patch, regardless of what sheen you choose, it's going to be different than the rest of the wall. Now, primers are resin rich. And what that means is that they seal the
Porosity.
moisture. Yeah, porosity, what Rachel said.
The holiness of it.
Yeah, seals
Not
that
the-
moisture in. The other thing a primer will do, it will block stains. If this were water damaged, and Lord knows we've had enough water in the last 12 months to cause some water damage. If it were water damage, this primer would seal that in. The other thing that's very important about a primer, it improves the adhesion. And paint will adhere to this material differently than it will the patch kit.
That is true. I patched some, well, I found a patch in my kitchen that had not been primed, and it was painted straight onto the drywall mud or the spackle, and after a while it just popped up. It made a little bubble.
Well,
Where the actual paint came up because it wasn't sticking to this spackle.
And it wasn't sealed, and that moisture wasn't contained. So
Made a bubble
good
in your
example,
paint.
Rachel.
I know.
We didn't even rehearse that.
No,
or anything.
It drove me crazy because then you have to fix the bubble and then repaint everything.
Okay, we got all the dust off. We've got most of the imperfections out.
What is? Let's talk about this though. This is our Zinser Bullseye 123 primer, and this is one of the best primers that we have.
Right.
All of the Zinser brands are.
It'll seal. It'll keep the moisture in. It's water-based, so it goes on easy and it cleans up easy. The very best part about this primer is it can be recoated in 1 hour.
Nice.
1 hour it's dry. You can put your finish coat on.
We
won't put a finish coat on this project. Our objective here was to show you how to patch the drywall.
Yep.
And we're going to put the primer on to hopefully it'll blend in fairly well.
Well, my perfectionist in me sees these metal bits coming out.
Right.
Is that going to be a problem eventually or ever?
Well, it would be better if we could show you this after the primer dries.
Okay.
Because this primer has a poor wet hide characteristic and a good dry hide characteristic.
Maybe Christian can come back and get some pictures of it when it's dry.
Yeah. So just put that first coat of primer on there and just cover everything and make sure you overlap your patch. And if it were a big area, you'd probably be using a roller. I didn't want to clean up a roller, so I didn't use one.
We do have tiny little rollers too.
We do.
You could just get a tiny roller.
That's about all I'm going to do for that right now.
Nice. But that's all you have to do to patch it, and then the rest is aesthetics.
And I could have spent a little more time right here feather edging that patch down a little bit. Too late for that now while the paint's wet, but if you wanted to fix it, you could sand right through that primer and knock that down a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, you can always go back and fix.
Not bad. But answer Rachel's question, you can start to see it hide that metal look up here.
Yeah.
And as it dries, it'll hide that a little better.
But bonus points, you don't have a hole in your wall anymore.
True.
So, like any skill, the more you practice it, the better you're going to be at it.
That's right.
Hopefully you don't have very many holes in your walls in your house, though. I mean,
primarily,
I'd question your life.
Mainly, you're going to have the little picture hanging holes.
Yes.
Because we like to put pictures up.
Yes.
We like to take them down. We like to move them.
Yeah.
And
well, this is done.
right.
I'm going to call it a day. We're done with this project. If you have any questions that you need to come into the store to ask one of our associates, you can come in and talk to any of our fixers, and we'll help you get what you need to patch a hole in drywall.
Well, as always, we don't mind your questions. We don't mind them at all.
See you next time.